Well, Ukrainian military officials say Russian tanks are now advancing on the key city of Luhansk. A battle now reportedly underway for control of airfields near that city. This is Ukraine's president once again claims that thousands of Russian troops have again invaded Ukraine, helping those pro-Russian separatists. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin is now calling for talks that would, quote, determine statehood in the southeastern part of Ukraine. That after Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko blasted Putin for waging what he called a war of aggression and terror in Europe against his country. So, can Putin be stopped, or is it already too late? Joining us is John Bolton, former United States ambassador to the United Nations, a Fox News contributor, and senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Ambassador, do you think Putin will get what he wants?
Well, I think he's well on the way, and I think his calculus is that given that he has already seized and annexed the Crimea away from Ukraine, and that he's inserted troops into these two eastern provinces with no effective Western response, and he is apparently continuing the Russian offensive even after this weekend's meeting of European Union leaders who threaten more sanctions. I think Putin thinks he holds the high cards. He doesn't see anything in his way, and I think he's going to continue to press until he meets opposition.
Well, you talk about the meeting and calling for more sanctions. Why would anyone think that further sanctions would achieve anything that the current sanctions have not already succeeded in achieving?
Well, I think you either have to be a European or work in the Obama White House, because it's perfectly clear that the sanctions have not slowed Putin down at all. And while they have had some economic impact on Russia, don't forget that about 10 days ago, Ukraine's currency reached its all-time low against the dollar, so that the sanctions are having a dramatic negative effect on Ukraine as well. But I think the main point is that Putin is following a fight and talk strategy as part of his approach to the government in Kiev. He wants a government in Kiev that's compliant with Russian interests. He'd be happy to negotiate that kind of government, or he'd be happy to use force to get the same thing.
Yeah, that's a great perspective, a fight and talk strategy. Right now, we're in the fight. Last week was the talk. I mean, take a look. He met with Petro Poroshenko. They had a summit. They shook hands, he and Putin together. I mean, what was the purpose of this meeting? What did it achieve, if anything? And what, Ambassador, should we have already done? I mean, should we, as there are some calls on Capitol Hill, arm Ukraine and let them into NATO to stop this Russian aggression?
Well, absolutely. We've got two issues at stake here. One had to deal tactically with the immediate Russian military activity, and I think that is full justification for the United States and its NATO allies to arm and do more to help the Ukrainian military, which has done okay so far against the separatists, but no guarantee they can keep that up against better trained Russian troops. But second, from a more strategic point of view, Putin is not going to stop unless he sees at some point that NATO is prepared to do something to come to Ukraine's defense. And I think that means at least sending the political signal that Ukraine is on the track to NATO membership. I think that would cause Putin to rethink it. Remember, he's very popular at home in Russia with what he's doing in Ukraine. But that's because Russian casualties so far have been low, or at least have been concealed from the Russian people. Don't forget what happened to them in Afghanistan and Chechnya. There is an upper limit to how far Putin can go here.
Yeah, finally, we're hearing reports that mothers of some of the soldiers have been demonstrating and protesting, saying, you know, why? No one told me my son was sent to Ukraine, he was killed. I didn't, buy that. Could that grow, number one? And number two, that NATO meeting, end of the week in Wales, Thursday and Friday, do you think just the simple fact that they could say, we will consider Ukraine for NATO membership, would that be enough to have Putin back down?
I don't think that would be enough, but I think it would be a start. I think there's no question, as the president was quick to say a couple weeks ago, Russia could beat Ukraine in one-on-one combat. That's not the issue, though. The issue is whether the Ukrainians, with assistance, weapons, and intelligence from NATO, can raise the cost to Russia sufficiently high that it deters Putin from going beyond these two eastern provinces that he's in now, in addition to Crimea. So far, this is fairly limited from Russia's point of view. There are a lot of other provinces that are pro-Russian culturally that he hasn't tried to stir up yet. So I think you've got to keep the big picture in mind here.
Ambassador John Bolton, always good to see you. Thank you so much, of course, for your insight.